So welcome along to A Story to Tell with me, Richard Beauvoisin. This is mainly taken from my Radio Bath show every Thursday morning from 10 until 12. If you do like it, don't forget to subscribe, share it to others and let everyone know all about Radio Bath. Hope you enjoy it. Morning everybody, so it's Richard Beauvoisin here until midday today. So today you've got a full double whammy of me, okay, you really have. So first off we're going to be chatting to Stephanie and Katey. They're from all about World Childless Week, which we'll explain more as we go through. They're here in about 5 minutes or so. And then from 11:30 you got the chance to hear an interview which I did with AJ and Curtis Pritchard. AJ Pritchard from Strictly, Curtis Pritchard from Love Island. I'm going to be playing that, recorded that last week. They're doing the Come What May tour, coming to Bath on Wednesday 2nd of October, which I shall be going along to. But going for our first topic, if you have any questions about being childless over the age of 45, then do message in studio@radiobath.com, or you can text Bath followed by a message to 80011, and we'll be chatting to Stephanie and Katey very shortly. Now, I was just chatting to Katey off air all about the fact that song has got possibly the most perfect production and structure and everything about it. It's Cuddly Toy Roachford, 1988. Man, I feel old. I turned 50 this year, Katey. Morning, by the way.
Morning.
There you go. So, live on Zoom. I'm kind of all over the place here. I've got Zoom to my left-hand side. Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning.
There you go. You are coming out loud and clear, which is fantastic. And I've got Katey here. Now, Stephanie is... What is your official title, Katey? Sorry, Stephanie. I do apologise. Confused myself now.
I'm the founder of World Childless Week. I actually came up with the idea and started it from day one.
Fabulous. Now, we're going to chat to you. And Katey, you are here as... I'm going to say an example of it, but that sounds really weird. So this has started off a really strange conversation, if I'm honest with you. But so yeah, we're going to be talking all about World Childless Week, and this is World Childless Week right as we speak now. So Stephanie, you are the founder of it. Tell us all about it. Why are we talking to you?
Because I discovered when I would be childless, not by choice, that there was literally no physical or online events for somebody who was going through the grief of knowing they would never be a parent. So there was a gap in the market. I saw it, spoke to some friends. They said, yes, we need to actually put it out there, let people know that they're not alone, which is exactly what you think when all you can see around you is parents. So literally in 2017, I came up with this idea and set up a Facebook page, and it all started from there.
Okay. Now, I'll be honest with you, until I spoke to Katey about this, it had never really crossed my mind the principle of what you kind of go for. So what is the scenario of being World Childless Week? What does that actually mean regarding yourself, for instance?
For the people who are childless not by choice, as I said, we feel like we're not seen, we're not heard, we don't have a voice in society. It's very much a pronatal world. So we see those who are having children, which is wonderful and what we want and what we wanted. But because we don't get that, we feel almost like we're pushed out and under society. So the 7 days gives the childless the actual platform they need to share their stories and their voice from their perspective.
Okay, it's running at the moment. When does it run until?
Yeah, it's literally started on Monday and it goes on until Sunday. There's a different topic every day and submissions and webinars happening across the whole week.
I was going to say, where can people kind of see this? If they are affected by this, then where can they pick it up? Is it local to here, or where is it?
It's on a website. It all started on Facebook, but it's now on a website. So it literally is worldchildlessweek.net. So it gives access to everybody because that is incredibly important. Yes, it's on social media as well, but if they go to the website, they can find everything they need from there.
Amazing. Now, we're going to chat to Katey very shortly, but if it's okay, Stephanie, we'd love to hear your story, if that's okay, to find out why are you childless?
It's a series of events, really. I always knew from a young age that I wanted to be a mum. I chose my daughter's age at the name at the age of 10, I believe. Yeah, 10. But in my 20s, I was in an abusive relationship. So I went on the contraceptive pill to ensure that I didn't fall pregnant while in that scenario. I luckily got out of that and met my husband to be in my early 30s. But we were both coming from situations and places where we didn't want to make a commitment straight away. So by the time we really sort of settled into it and decided we wanted a family, I was already over 35. I think I was about 37 years old. It took us a couple of years to then go to a doctor's because nothing was happening. And went through all the tests, him and myself, until we eventually sat in a hospital room where a doctor who was extremely nervous and fidgety, didn't want to look me in the eyes, turned around and said, if he ever makes you pregnant, it's highly unlikely you'll carry full term. So, and left it floating in the air. So I knew at the age of 39, very fast approaching 40, that I'd never have children.
And I know it's a classic question, but how did you feel at that moment?
Shock. Tears, just tears and tears and tears. Do you know what I mean? It was like everything you thought the rest of your life would be about is suddenly ripped away. Yeah. So literally from that day, you're in a dark shadow and you don't understand what the future holds. But you also don't realise it's grief because you haven't physically lost something, and that's our perspective of grief. And yet there's so many layers to grief and dimensions of being hitting grief. But yeah, the pain was immense.
Yeah. Thank you for telling us that story. I'm going to ask Katey now a very similar question. So you're here. I know you from dancing, and you were the one that kind of brought this topic to light for me, and I didn't know anything about this at all. So can you tell us your story, Katey?
Yeah. Okay. So, like Stephanie, I'd always wanted to be a mum, and you kind of grown up in society, and people, that's kind of the expectation and the sort of the natural dream, and yeah, and then it kind of wasn't happening, and I guess actually I suppose it also really started when I did lose a baby, and it was very, it was very difficult because I'd very much got into the mindset of actually telling the world that I was having a baby, ready to be a mum, kind of ready to turn away from my career, going out, all of those, you kind of change. You get ready for another phase in life, and then it was kind of just taken away very suddenly. Yeah. And you kind of have to go through, labour and a situation which you kind of absolutely never, you wasn't kind of one of your nightmares. You just thought, I really don't want that when I grow up. Certainly.
I suppose it's a scenario of this will never happen to me.
Yeah, exactly. Before that, I always thought, I'm so lucky. I'm really lucky. And then after that, I then very much felt differently about if people would, I think, I was going in for some small minor surgery, I'd be asking the question, well, how often is it? Because I've been that, that minority, and it's not, yeah, and if that happens, it's dreadful. And I think what really got to me was actually how there wasn't anyone to sort of share it with, who really understood. And then from there, you would be encouraged a lot to keep trying, and have another baby and things like that. And you are trying. You get so much advice. And all of this advice that you don't know whether or not it's going to come to fruition with anything, and it's just a really kind of hard and lonely place to be in, because all the while you're trying to act normally, get on with your life, go back to the person who you were, even though you've fundamentally changed, being treated with people who don't know, because you don't really want to tell people because it's a bit depressing, and you're trying to maybe not be miserable all the time, and it's just really hard because people quite, what's the word, almost casually ask, do you have children? How old are you? Like kind of assessing your fertility. Will you have children? Will we get on? And all of those kind of normal questions. And I don't reply back to ask people, what are they getting up to and what's their preferences in the sort of the bedroom intimate moments and things like that. It's kind of, you don't ask those things, and you start to realise actually it's extremely intimate and private and a difficult thing to talk about, and you're kind of in a situation where you kind of have to casually talk about it, or say something very kind of rude or awkward, or and you're just trying to meet these people, and And I just felt that I was coming across these situations so often. It was really difficult, and that's where I tried to really seek out, other people or other circumstances where I might feel a connection with society, because it's just extremely isolating and lonely. And that's kind of where I eventually found this group, and it was just really helpful. And I actually, to be fair, one of the things I noticed was there was two things. One, I actually did some research as well on men, and actually a lot of the time men apparently experience the grief as well, but they don't feel it until much later on, because they've got this kind of complacency that they've still got time, and then they find themselves without grandchildren, which they were kind of expecting, and things like that. And actually, I guess where I'm coming from is actually also the story of the fear of you don't know whether or not you're going to be in that group, and you remember all the things that people said to you when you were like 20, and you should have children, it's the most important thing in the world, and all of those sorts of things, and everything in life is all about feeling brilliant and motherhood, and it's about being a woman and all of those things, and they kind of remember those things when you find yourself in that group. So that's why I thought it was such a useful topic.
No, it's an incredible topic. And Stephanie, how do you feel when you hearing somebody like Katey, that she's getting the support from your group?
It's brilliant and it's wonderful, and it's what it's there for, because it's not just about this 1 week. The website itself has got a multitude of resources there, so the hope is that people can find the help that needs them, the help that they need, whether that be through joining a group, through sharing a submission in World Childless Week, finding a counsellor, reading a book. There's something that everybody gets drawn to, and if they can find the help it's always been there, but it's been a lot quieter, so it's getting louder now, which is what we want, because we want people to know that if they don't end up with the children they wanted, that there is somewhere they can go and find that support and that community. Because, as I said, you just feel so alone, and it's so hard to actually reach out to anybody, because you don't know anybody quite often who isn't a parent, and therefore who do you reach out to? It's a real sort of mental struggle.
No, it is very tough, and we're going to delve much more into it. If you want to message in, then email studio@radiobath.com if you have any questions for Stephanie or Katey. We've got some of the classic questions that people often ask, and kind of how it will make you guys feel. So we'll be talking about those very shortly. Let's hold on, and Wilson Phillips. It's Richard Beauvoisin here until midday today. We're talking all about motherless women today. Now, just chatting off air very quickly with the lovely Katey. She's here as well as Stephanie. Good morning still, Stephanie, if you weren't here earlier.
Good morning.
Always a good thing. Now, Katey, we were chatting about, that you'd had some problems giving birth, but that hasn't kind of finished your story necessarily. So what's the end of your story?
Well, I guess I'm probably a little bit hesitant about when I talk about it, because I'm conscious that it can sort of sound like a very clear element of grief to I basically my story started with a partner that changed their mind, and then I basically had a stillborn, which was extremely difficult. I kind of tried to recover from that, and then I had 5 miscarriages, and rounds of IVF as well, and so I can sense that like my griefs are a lot more kind of instant, whereas I'm very conscious that there is, even without those sort of scenarios, actually the pain of maybe not even having to have gotten to that, to had the joy of feeling a pregnancy and things like that is also a grief and a difficulty. So I probably maybe I kind of soften that, but yeah, basically I got to a point where I can't keep living like a decade of that sort of constant grief and pain is just no way to sort of live your life really, and for me to survive mentally and to be part of the world rather than just focusing on trying to be a mother, there's other elements of my life and my personality and people around me, and you just have to kind of walk away from it eventually. But it is very difficult these days because science can keep going on, and people will keep people kind of think you're giving up and you don't really want it, or so it is kind of hard. It's hard to admit to people that you failed. Ultimately, like physically, I was unable to. Mentally, I've just given up because it's just been too difficult. And so it's not really a kind of topic you kind of post on Facebook.
No, I mean, Facebook is the best life that we lead, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of what everybody says.
Yeah.
And it's quite strange when you see people posting things that haven't gone well on Facebook. And in lots of ways, you kind of look at it and go, that's not the reason I'm looking at Facebook to find out how terrible your life is. So you need those outlets, which is kind of, I suppose, where World Childless Week comes in that regards. So Stephanie, we're going to go through a number of these different reasons. Thank you for that, by the way, Katey. I know it's a really difficult topic to talk about, and it's emotional for everybody.
I think what's quite different in this scenario is it's actually one of the first situations where almost I've been invited almost to sort of to come out the closet, as it were, on it, because I think normally it's people just sort of showing kind of curiosity and prodding at it, and I'm not quite feeling ready for it. I'm not prepared for it. It's none of your business. All of those. It's not how I want to present myself. So this was actually quite a different scenario. It's actually when you get out in society that it's more difficult to talk about because you don't want to talk about it.
No, it's often a painful topic which you try and bring up. So we're going to go through a number of the different reasons for being childless. So Stephanie, we're going to start with yourself. So, Katey mentioned about this, but physical illnesses. What type of physical illnesses kind of can stop you being a mother?
There's a lot of people who know about PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome or endometriosis. They're very common. Quite often they don't get diagnosed until sort of 10 years after they start or later. So by that time, it can have already, caused real problems for fertility for women. But there are also things that can happen at birth, perhaps on MIKH, where your internal organs don't fully develop as a woman, so it stops you from being given birth. So there are multiple different scenarios, and we could talk for the whole hour and a half probably on that alone, which obviously we're not going to do. But yeah, there are numerous different reasons. It could be perhaps a gentleman has no sperm, or the sperm ability and things like that are problems. So there can be issues on both sides.
Yeah. Okay. And Katey, you mentioned the mental side of it as well. So, I mean, it's got written down here, mental illness. It's not necessarily a mental illness, but the strain of having having miscarriages, is a completely different topic. That must weigh quite a lot on you.
Yeah, it's really painful, and you kind of keep having to sort of try and find ways to sort of get over it and kind of not get over it, but kind of like live with it and be strong. And it's just
it must be exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a very difficult one. Now, Stephanie, you mentioned earlier on abusive relationships as well. How does that kind of play into this then?
Yeah, for me personally, it was just the case that I knew I didn't want children to have a father who was, if he was abusive to me, there's a good chance he was going to be abusive to them. And even if that didn't happen, they would see the abuse going on at me and think, okay, that's acceptable, which obviously it isn't. And it could, again, that's a sort of mental abuse in a way, sort of thing that they could grow up around that and think that's normal, or I don't want to do that. So there are issues. Some people find they don't have children because they're scared they will repeat the pattern that their parents actually brought on them. It doesn't have to be physical. It could just be mental abuse. So there are different aspects to that side as well.
Okay, and got written down here disability too. Now I'm guessing there's lots and lots of different disabilities, physical as well as mental disabilities too. Stephanie, what's your thoughts on that?
With disability, it could be that somebody's got a disability with a person, because obviously it's every individual's choice, but they may feel that they can't bring a child up the way they want to because the ability they have at certain things is possibly not the way they want it to be, so they might not be able to give that child a life. So it's almost like you're making the choice not to have a child in your head because you don't think you can give them the life they deserve, but in your heart it's pulling you in the opposite direction. So it's really tough. But yeah, it's obviously an individual's choice, but they may feel they can't give the child basically the life that they deserve.
And I was oh, sorry, Katey, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I think it's quite important that I wouldn't want people to be put off sometimes talking to people about the mental struggles of it and the difficulty of it, because sometimes with things like that, actually a bit of encouragement of actually, well, maybe things will be different for you, and why do you think this, and that kind of encouragement is really helpful. But at the same time, I guess the point that I personally found mentally exhausting was the constant, oh, where are you in your journey? Are you on IVF? Have you been trying? Are you putting your legs up, and all these kind of intimate things that people are constantly asking you about. Where are you in your cycle? And I think that was the sort of the mental exhaustion for me personally. Yeah. But I think I just want to sort of point out that it's not always the case. Sometimes it is a case that it needs to be discussed. I guess for me, what I found particularly difficult is how casually it's constantly brought up by women that I've sometimes just literally just met, and they'll say, do you have children? How old are you? Why not? Do you know what I mean? And they'll kind of go, oh, that's and that's what I found personally difficult.
Now, I was chatting to somebody the other day about this topic in preparation for doing this, and we were talking about the social and economic situations, about whether people can even afford to have children. Because I've got, as I've mentioned earlier, I have 4 of them, and I'll be honest with you, they cost a lot of money. And yeah, I don't know how I pay for them half the time, if I'm honest with you. So kind of, Stephanie, with the social and economic situations, how does that kind of fit in?
Yeah, as you say, it's like we all know that kids aren't cheap. There's a lot of money involved there, but some people, again, they'll try and decide whether they can. Maybe it could be that they're renting a property and it's only 1 bed and they need to go to a 2-bed house and they can't afford that sort of financial go up. And a lot of parents will say, don't worry about it. It's always it's a struggle, but when you've got to do it, you'll do it. But there's other people who think, I know at the moment I can only just afford food for myself, so how could I afford food for a child? So again, it's delaying to the point where you possibly can afford it. And unfortunately for some, when they do have the opportunity, fertility might be paying out into it or something else. So yeah, it's always quite often with many people a mixed bundle of reasons to why they're childless rather than one defined aspect.
Yeah, and Katey, you mentioned this last one earlier on as well, about partners changing their minds. Now, we're going to be very careful not to mention who and all of that type of thing, but you mentioned your partner changing their mind.
Yes, I did mention that.
And it's a difficult one to do, really, because, you're both kind of going, hey, let's go for it, and then all of a sudden one person turns around and goes, do you know what, it's not for me.
Yeah. I think... it is understandable, because I think, it's almost like that situation when a lot of women will talk about when they're kind of pregnant, then their waters break and they go, oh no, I'm scared. And I think actually that can happen at different stages, for partners, when they actually get to it and they think, actually, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And these days you actually... because there's so much contraception, it is much more of an act of discussing it.
And it's much more in control as well, isn't it? Because people you can come off the pill, for instance, or not wear condoms or whatever it may be, that will then control what is happening. So you have to make that conscious decision. Yes, we're going for it. And if one of you doesn't want to, then that can be quite difficult. We're going to have another little break for some music. When we come back, we're going to talk about how it also affects men and some of the stats and stereotypes as well. Starlight and Muse, that's Richard Beauvoisin here until midday today, here on Radio Bath. This morning we're talking all about childless women. I have Katey and Stephanie here. Stephanie's from the World Childless Week. Stephanie, remind us very quickly about the website and how people can get in contact with you.
Yeah, it's a simple one. It's www.worldchildlessweek.net, and you can get in touch with me straight through the website contact page.
Amazing. Now, we're going to talk a number of different topics here over this next section, okay? So we're going to talk about men very quickly. And I was thinking about this myself, in that, does it affect men? Because they can still keep having children right until the very end. So how can it affect men, Stephanie?
Well, for starters, they can't always have children.
Oh, okay.
No, because obviously the one thing is we often assume fertility issues are solely on the woman. But you can basically say 30% women, 30% men, and 30% combined. So it literally is a case of 50-50 when it comes down to fertility issues. But men often, because the way, like I say, with the world ticks over, they believe that they can have children until an older age, but it's not always the scenario.
Well, I suppose that the scenario is, and I was thinking about this in preparation for this show, is that I suppose you could still have a child as a man, as a 70-year-old, but to do that, you've kind of got to be with somebody that's 40-ish and below, and your chances of finding somebody that's 40-ish and below when you're 70 is pretty slim unless you're Rod Stewart. So that's kind of the scenario I would suggest. So there must be that point where men get to a certain point and think it's unlikely to happen for me as well. So
I think if people are in a relationship, then obviously, like you say, they find out earlier, and as they age, there is the case that if they're childless to that point because they've not met a partner or a partner who they actually sort of settle down with to have a child with, then yes, they might think that in later years that's going to happen. But the one point I would also say is that the world gives a false image that women can have children easily in the 30s and the 40s. But in general, our fertility actually starts to fall from about the age of 28 and actually falls off a cliff at 35. So those who fall pregnant in the late 30s and 40s, it does happen, but it's not the norm. It's not standard. It's not as easy as people would think. So I just wanted to add that to the situation.
Yeah, I have to say, hearing those...
Oh, your microphone went very funny then. Carry on.
I'd say hearing those sort of examples are... Yeah, I mean, I used to sort of hear every single one of them.
Your microphone's going, Katey. Can you pop to the other microphone?
Okay.
Try that one. There we go.
Hi. Yeah, I was saying, and people, it does encourage people to constantly encourage you to keep trying, and you hear them all, and sometimes you kind of the story they tell you to give you hope. You're like, yes, I haven't told you all of the details, and that person is actually in a better position than I am. Mine's actually worse than that, so it hasn't helped, and it's been just really upsetting. Thanks.
Yeah. No, it's very, very difficult. I've got a stat here, so. And this is a stat from the website, Stephanie. So it says, of the women who reached the age of 45 in 2020, 18% were childless at the end of their childbearing years, compared to 10% a generation before. Can you kind of fill the blanks in there a bit for me?
Yeah, so basically, there's less of us at the age of 45, which is they generally use as an age of when women will stop having children. So that's where that sort of age comes from. But they're showing, therefore, that in that generation that have gone by and grown, there are less women having children. So it's predicting that the increase of childlessness and being child-free is on the increase. And there's another report that says that the median average age for a woman to have children is 30. And that percentage has gone up higher because women are assuming that IVF and egg freezing are a way to actually achieve becoming a parent, when the statistics, again, for those are not that great and not that high, but because they're based on companies having financial gain, they're publicised and pushed as being, a sure bet at the end of the day, when they're really not.
Yeah. I was thinking about that statistic, 18%, which is not far from 20%. That's 1 in 5 women. Bear in mind there's going to be 30 odd million ladies in the UK. Divide that by 5, that's 6 million women in the UK that are in this scenario. It's a massive group.
It's huge. We're literally an unrecognised minority that's almost not a minority, because, as you say, it's pretty much 1 in 5 women and 1 in 4 men. So to realise that we're actually still quite invisible and not seen, and that when we end up without that child that we wanted, we feel alone and not seen. And yet, reality, if we look around, we're there, but we are hidden because our voice is so quietened.
Yeah, and people tend to just assume that you have chosen not to. And that's actually, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
They're going to assume, of course, you can have a baby if you want a baby. You just have to try hard enough.
Well, we're going to talk about some of the things that people say here, but first of all, I want some advice from both of you, okay? So I had the scenario, a good friend of mine, they had a stillborn child. The anniversary of it was just a few days ago, actually, of 6 years ago. And I remember at the time seeing them not long afterwards. They came back out in public, and I had absolutely no idea what to say to them. And I found it incredibly difficult. What do you say to somebody that's had a stillborn child? So, Katey, as somebody that's actually experienced that, help me out here. What would be the right thing to say?
Something that is just to acknowledge it. It doesn't have to be something really overt and hugs and cuddles and cries or anything
so
like that.
not to ignore it then?
It's just not to ignore it. I mean, for me personally, I definitely, after a year after my stillborn, I actually deleted quite a lot of friends from Facebook, because I thought, I actually know that we've got mutual friends and these people know what's happened, and they knew that I was pregnant and things like that. And they haven't contacted me just to even just acknowledge it, not even sort of say like, hi, how are you, how's things, so I could at least tell them, even though I know they know. And it would just be, it's too awkward for them, and it's like, yes, it is awkward for you, but it's pretty uncomfortable for me too.
Fairly devastating for yourself. Yeah,
exactly. And just a polite acknowledgement of something like, I don't know, I hope you're managing okay, or I appreciate it's been a maybe a difficult time of the year for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Something like that is all that's needed. You actually kind of don't want to be massively encouraged to necessarily. No. I personally didn't want to anyway. No,
I'm guessing when people go out in public, they don't really want to talk about it, but having the acknowledgement of somebody saying, I acknowledge what's happened, if there's anything we can do, then let us know, and just move on.
Yeah, exactly, because actually it can be quite heartbreaking to sometimes feel that you're just you're ignoring your child.
Yeah, no, and that's really, really difficult. Now, Stephanie, we're going to talk about some of the classic things that are said to people. So the first one then, have you got kids? What's the problem with that?
Because you have to say no, and when you say no, quite often it can lead to the person going, I don't know what to do now, so okay, then they'll make a hasty excuse to go and stand beside their parent friends. Or you can get the intrusive questions, or you can get them basically just showing you 1,000 pictures of their kids. But when it gets to the intrusive questions, that's when the problems start, because they're asking you things about your private life that you don't necessarily want to say, with the classic being, have you considered adoption?
Yeah, that's the next one.
And I'm at the age now where I want to say, no, what's that? Put it back on them. But, then you're seen as the bad person because you're making them feel awkward.
Yeah.
But it's, well, think about how you've just posed that question to me.
Yeah.
I haven't turned around and said, why have you got kids?
Yeah, I actually often reply to people when they ask me, have I thought about adoption? I always say, have you thought about adoption? Because, as well. Because, I mean, it's also a difficult route. I know myself, I looked at it, and I'd had so much assessment on my physical ability to have babies. I just thought, I don't really want to be assessed again and spend years through assessment. And then essentially, you can be in a situation where you've then got challenges around, maybe the child is rejecting you, and it's just, you've already been through a lot of pain. Actually, it's not an easy fix. It's a tough one to go through.
Now, I suppose a lot of people try and think of adoption, if you do it, I'm just thinking about your scenario here, Katey, that you've gone through an enormous amount already, and then to try and put the adoption process, which again I know people that are going through it, it's a hell of a lot to go through that process. Are you mentally strong enough? And then you have the scenario of bringing up a child that isn't yours, that won't have necessarily the same connection to you, and that must be a difficult one to think about. Stephanie, what do you think?
There's so many different aspects, because for many people, you want your own child because you want to see your own eyes reflected in that baby. And as you say, when you go for an adoption thing, it could be you feel like your body's failed you, and then if a team of strangers tell you that you can't adopt, it's like a second failure that you've got to sort of emotionally work through and things like that. But again, there's no guarantees. The actual adoption rate is quite low from what I believe. I remember years ago seeing that it was like something like 1 in 8 women struggle with fertility, and 1 in 8 adoptions are successful.
Right.
So, it's really hard to put yourself through that emotional task. And even the fact they will look into so many things about you, they would have taken my abusive relationship into consideration, as well as the fact I was grieving for children. There's just so many different aspects, and say it's not a fix.
And the very last bit on this before we go into the news is, my favourite phrase is, no kids, do you want mine? How do you feel about that? No, why not?
No.
You don't want my kids then?
No, I wanted my own, and that's the problem. It's not something to be made light-hearted. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yes, it's a joke, and you might be having a bad day, but do you really want to give them to me? No, you don't. And I don't want them.
Not so much.
I wanted my own.
Well, it's time for the news. You guys are going to be back after 11 o'clock. If you have any questions, email studio@radiobath.com. There's Coldplay, Adventure of a Lifetime. So back with the second hour now. Katey and Stephanie are here from World Childless Week. Stephanie, remind us very quickly again of the website and how people can view what's happening this week.
Yeah, gladly. It's www.worldchildlessweek.net, and you go to our stories page. You can be able to read all the submissions and find out about all of the webinars across the week.
So we're talking about people, ladies and men, that are childless, effectively post the age of 45, really, isn't it? That's the scenario.
Standard, yeah.
We're going to talk, Katey, very quickly to yourself about something you said off air, which, if you're okay to talk about it, we'll find out. But you mentioned how much of a woman you are and how it makes you feel regarding not having children.
Yeah, I think this might actually link to some of the stereotypes that we're going to talk about. Is that there is there is a kind of feeling that your body is failing you. You're not in some way like fulfilling the purpose of being a woman, of being a mother in society. Not maybe fitting in with the other women, and so that can actually feel. It can kind of affect your like emotional relationship with your partner because you feel like you're failing, and also just kind of other women in the workplace so it's really difficult to change that identity where you'd always thought that you were this kind of fabulous woman, obviously.
You are fabulous.
Thank you.
Let me just point that out.
Thank you. And then you have this sort of realisation that, that you're not as fabulous as, a woman as you thought you were, and that's kind of hard to sort of adjust to, which I guess is why I kind of said I actually. Started to enjoy the sort of couples dancing in Ciroc because it's an element of it's a what's the word, like a performance, like it's a place in that you can access where it's not about you're not dancing with a child on your hip.
There are no children there.
Yeah. And it's just about kind of expressing yourself, and your femininity and things like that. And so I think that's why I actually found it quite helpful for me.
I had a chap once that I knew that only had one leg, and one of my children actually turned round to him and went, "So do you consider yourself a complete human being?" And he went, "Well, if I've only got one leg, I'm still the same human being I was before. If I take another leg off, it hasn't changed. I'm still a human being." And I suppose in this regards, it's quite similar, in that you feel like part of you is missing to some degree.
Yeah,
and that must be quite hard. And Stephanie, how do you feel, again, hearing these stories? You must have heard, as the founder of this, hundreds of these stories, and kind of how does it make you feel?
No, I agree, because as somebody who looked at everybody else who appeared to be a mum, you just think, why can my body not do that? I'm having these monthly reminders. I'm having this monthly pain, and yet my body is giving me this false news. Do you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's like, I want to go through the menopause because I don't want these monthly reminders that my body is it's a failure. It's failed me. But I'd also like to say the other aspect again is perhaps women who don't find a partner and they don't feel as if then there's something wrong with them because they can't find somebody who will love them, that wants to settle down and have children. So it's not just about fertility, it's about the fact you just think there's something wrong with me.
And there must be an amazing pressure. You get to, let's say, mid-30s, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not with anybody. To have a baby, I've got to try and find somebody that is in that place that wants to have a baby, and then we've got to do it, and then it will be successful. That must be a lot of pressure. Yeah,
I have to say, actually, because I sort of find that I can get asked the questions around intimacy elements, but actually it's pretty intimate as well for the society to sort of say, oh, are you not with someone? Why are you having trouble dating? And that type of thing. So it's still the same kind of thing of something that you don't really want to, delve into. Firstly, especially when you've just met them.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? Do you want to have children?
Yeah. Why don't you have a boyfriend?
Must be very difficult. Now we're going to talk some cruel stereotypes here. The first one is the evil stepmum. Yeah. Stephanie, what do you think about that?
Just look at Disney.
Right.
How many Disney stories are there with evil stepmoms? Do you know what I mean? So from a very young age, that insinuation that if you don't have children, you're evil, it comes into play before you even get to an adult. Do you know what I mean? And it's like you say, it might not be that you notice it, you're consciously aware of it, but it's there and it's rooted in your subconscious. So
also, I find that you get to a certain age and the men that you're dating, well, an awful lot of them do have children, and an awful lot of them also maybe aren't feeling what's the word, are separated or haven't been felt fulfilled in the relationship family that they were in, and I sometimes find it difficult that the assumption is that I don't know, like that it's me taking them away or something like that. If I'm dating someone who has already left, it can still, even though they've already broken up from that relationship, it can kind of be seen as still your fault, and it's kind of pretty tough actually, because I have no interest in that really. It's like, not at all.
Fair enough. Another one is emotionless business women.
Yeah, we're the high flyers. Right. We don't care who we stand on or step on to get to the top of the business. And usually it's like, they don't care because they don't have the heart of a mother. Because as a parent, I have empathy, whereas me, as a childless woman, I'm so cruel and evil. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's put it that people assume if you don't have children, it's because you wanted quite often to advance in your career and make it to the top and earn money.
The high-flying career people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it can work the other way as well, because I've been interviewed and for a job that I've been offered in the past, and then the next time I was interviewed for it for maybe 5 years later, being told that I didn't have enough experience, but I clearly did because I've already done it, been offered it before. And but in the interview, they just kept asking questions around, they weren't asking questions because they're not allowed to, but they kept talking about how other people in the team have children, and kept talking about it. It's just very difficult to kind of carry on from that conversation. And I didn't really want to kind of say to them, oh, you'll be fine with me, because I just thought it's not really something I want to talk about. And then I didn't get the job anyway, and I kind of feel like I felt like a sort of double loss. Like, well, I didn't get the job because they thought I would, and I wish that was why I was losing the job.
There are many other reasons, Katey, why you didn't get the job, but let's not go into that. That's a joke, obviously. I'd like to point that out. The last one on this is being a crazy cat lady, Stephanie.
Oh my gosh, it's so prevalent in the news at the moment. And the thing is, it's almost become light-hearted in a way to rebel back now and seen as a positive to be, a childless cat lady. But the thing is, the root of it is the childless cat ladies were the witches at the end of the street who you were scared of, who you rang the doorbell for. And the voices coming out on social media, the majority are the child-free. And there were also parents going, yes, I've got kids, but I'm still a cat lady. Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. There's not many people actually from the childless community speaking out about it. And I think there's a saying that all publicity or news can be good news, and it's good that it's raising awareness that the childless are there, but it's also twisting the fact that childless doesn't mean by choice.
And my concern is it's putting people off having a cat in case they're then labelled a witch, because cats are fabulous.
Cats are fabulous.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, we've got one more bit to talk about, and that's going to be all about the social aspect and also being childless in the workplace as well. So back with Katey and Stephanie very soon. Now, just off air, we were talking about different songs that you can play. Now, I used to do hospital radio many, many years ago, and we had songs that were called the Z-list songs. So I'm going to call out a couple of these songs that we were banned from playing. Okay, so the first one, bear in mind, was hospital radio, was Led Zeppelin and Stairway to Heaven. Okay, and Rod Stewart, The First Cut is the Deepest. So we weren't able to play those. But kind of looking at some of the songs I've tried to play today, and it's like, oh, any of these songs could be like ripping at your heart a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of a bit weird. I've changed a few. Otherwise it feels a bit insensitive. But there we go. Right, time for the last part now with Stephanie and Katey. We've been talking all about World Childless Week. We can talk about social situations quickly now. So Katey, how do you feel when you go into a social situation? You've got couples and, talking about kids and all that type of stuff. How does that feel?
I think the thing that I struggle with the most is when people are really kind of complaining about the difficulties of having children and aren't I lucky, and they're partly probably maybe doing it to sort of help me feel more comfortable, but it actually just makes my sort of level of jealousy so much worse, because I'm just thinking that's even more unfair. You don't even like it.
And yet you've got them.
Yes, I'd much rather you just say I'm very lucky and I'm really happy and things like that. Even though of course sometimes they're going to have times that they're going to find difficult, but I'm maybe not the best person to share that with.
Fair enough. What about yourself, Stephanie?
I think the worst time is when you can't say anything, so you literally sit there for 5, 10, 15 minutes silent, because it's not one single aspect of conversation you can add your voice to, because otherwise you get the comment of, well, you don't have kids, you don't understand, or literally just eyes just staring you down and then twisting away again and carrying on where they started. So I just think, if you're silent in that conversation, it's like, well, should I just get my phone out or should I walk away? And nobody's going to even notice.
I actually sometimes just belligerently just sort of talk about my dog or my cat as though they're my child. And I know some people really find that really annoying, but I think, well, it's the best, replacement that I've got. So I'm going to own it.
You love your dog, don't you?
I do love my dog and my cat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is lovely. What about the workplace? You mentioned before about it can be quite difficult in the workplace, about getting jobs. But how do you feel, Katey, for yourself to start with, when people talk about their children at work, or they're using their children that they have to go to like sports days and all of that type of thing?
I think... Well, I think it's great that the workplace is trying to encourage people to have a work-life balance around their children. But for me, I've actually found it so difficult when people bring their babies into work. And I think that's fine. But sometimes it's happened where I've kind of maybe only that week had a miscarriage. And I'm kind of a little bit expected to coo. And why am I not cooing over this beautiful baby?
And you're feeling slightly sensitive at this moment.
I'm feeling really sensitive, and I'm thinking I've got to actually do some difficult work that I've got to think about. I just find that it's so frustrating and difficult, and oh God, I can't think what I was saying now.
And just to remind everybody that this is 1 in 5 women that this is affecting. So this isn't a small part of society. This is 20% of the society that are in this scenario.
Yes, and actually what I was going to say was that what I would really appreciate with workplaces when they encourage people to bring in their children is, can you just give us a warning that when it's going to happen, where they're going to be, so I can just be somewhere else.
Okay.
That's all I'm after.
And Stephanie, what about yourself regarding the workplace?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a case of if a baby's coming in, can it be done in a separate room or stay in reception, so you've still got your safety zone around your desk or where you are. So if you want to do it because you want to give them congratulations, you can go, but retreat before you start crying or something. So it's just accepting that space is really important, and the fact that if you're going to announce that you're pregnant, can you do it at the end of the day?
Yes.
And hold on to your tears until you get on the bus or in the car.
Yes.
Rather than the first thing in the morning before you've got a workload and all you can think about is that somebody's just announced their pregnancy.
Absolutely, because you have to work, and so you have to kind of find yourself in work. And what I find is that needs to be a place which is kind of safe from these sort of day-to-day upsets, because sometimes if I'm having a bad day, I might not go into town where I'm going to see a big pregnant woman or some children. I just think I might avoid town today, but I have to go to work. So it is important that I'm even on bad days, I'm not going to get something that's going to really make it just unbearable for me.
And it's a scenario, isn't it, that when you are sensitive about something or looking for something, then you see it much more. So I often talk about the fact of seeing yellow cars. It's a very strange analogy, but go with it for a second, okay? So you probably never ever notice yellow cars on the road, but they are everywhere, okay? And if you're looking for them, then you'll see them. Literally every 50th car or something like that is a yellow car. And what you guys have the scenario of is you'll be looking for all of these scenarios at work all of the time because it's forefront of your mind. So you'll see it all of the time, whereas somebody like myself, and again, I'd never even really thought about this until we started chatting about it, Katey. I'll never see it. And therefore, these people that are bringing their babies in at the beginning of the day or saying they're pregnant at the beginning of the day, it won't even cross their minds how it's affecting people like yourselves. So, Stephanie, how can people really help on that then?
Literally just thinking, if you've got an announcement, if you can make it at the end of the day, Or if you're friends with somebody, some people who are childless will say, well, can you tell me first if you know somebody's trying so that I'm prepared and then I can congratulate you when you make the public announcement? It's very hard and it depends on the connection you've got with people. But for work, leave it to the end of the day. Find a separate room, because for many people who are struggling with infertility, they'll be going to appointments or possibly going through miscarriages or receiving phone calls about adoption. And to go to work can be the safe zone where you forget all of that and you just get on with work. And when suddenly your work becomes a battle area as well to your emotions, it's really tough. So it's subtle, slight differences can make a major change for how somebody deals with it emotionally.
So today you guys are on to really raise the awareness of this. In World Childless Week, I believe there's some webinars and stuff, aren't there, Stephanie? What type of webinars have we got going on this week?
Gosh, there's 24 different webinars and they cover so many different aspects. And the one thing I'll say is that all the webinars are recorded. So every webinar from every year going back is still on the website. So it's, even if the topic's there this week, you think, okay, they're interesting, I like them, I'll watch a few. Look at the previous years, because we cover how you deal with all the awkward questions and the different scenarios about adoption. And, it must be in God's plan. Well, I don't care for God's plan. So there is something there that everybody relates to. And if they don't relate to it today, they might next week or next month.
And what's the cost of all of these?
Free, completely free.
Completely free.
Basically a library. I think of it as a library, a resource where people can go read the stories of people that they recognise, that they think, yes, I've been there, I've done that, I've had to put up with that situation, or listen to the discussions, but it's all there as a free resource to support people.
And how can people offer support as well? So if they're feeling like they've gone through some scenarios and they want to be supportive of people, can they do that, Stephanie?
Well, they can support by actually doing submissions when it comes around next year. The second biggest thing, or in fact, there is a donation button, but I don't like to talk about that because that's not my reason for doing the website. No. My biggest thing is get the word out there, talk about it wherever you can, whenever you feel confident, because it's word of mouth that is spreading it and not anything else, really, because there's no money to be made out of being childless. No. So it's down to us to actually get that, the noise created and speak about it.
And remind us again of the website, please, Stephanie.
www.worldchildlessweek.net.
So if anybody has been affected by this, which is amazingly still 1 in 5 people, please do contact Stephanie. Go onto the website. If you can't remember anything about it, then email studio@radiobars.com and we'll pass your details on to Stephanie. Thank you so much, guys, for today. It's been enlightening. That's probably the word I've got for it. I've learnt a lot. I hope the listeners have as well. I hope the rest of the week goes well for you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to say, just remember, everyone, you're not alone. You really aren't.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katey.
Thank you.